All right, I'm here with my good friend, Suneel Gupta. Suneel, thanks for joining the conversation, and I'm really excited to talk about your thought leadership and specifically your new book. Often, I think being backable is misunderstood. We think about the person with the most charisma and lights up the room, but those aren't necessarily the attributes that make someone backable. So if you want to become backable, and you're right that we all are trying to get something backed, whether it's funding or a job proposal or a new client win or anything in between, what are some of the first steps that somebody can take to begin on that journey of becoming backable?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to begin by realizing that just because you're getting rejected doesn't necessarily mean that you have a bad idea. You know, plenty of brilliant ideas were rejected. I mean, look at penicillin, for example. Has saved nearly 200 million lives to date, but it took 10 years for penicillin to become backable. I mean, Josh, have you ever been at a vending machine when you've been trying to put a bill in over and over again, and it keeps sending it right back?
Oh yeah.
And you're banging on the glass, and you're like, I want my Twix, right? Or Josh, you're a pretty healthy guy, so you're like, I want my extra crispy kale chips, right? I mean, that dollar that you have in your hand is still worth the same as a crisp, clean dollar bill. Same value, but it needs adjustments. Like that push-pull technique, that little tug-of-war thing that we do along the side of the machine. These little adjustments, and the same is true for our ideas. It's not that the idea is bad. It just needs to be adjusted. And so I went out looking for those adjustments. I needed to. I mean, if I was going to be a better contributor, if I was going to be a better leader, if I was going to have an impact in the world, I needed to learn how to become backable. So I started spending time with world-class people, in all these different industries, from executives at Fortune 500 companies to producers of Oscar-winning films to military leaders, culinary icons, to understand what it was that they did to make themselves backable. When they had an idea, how did they turn it into a reality? What were the steps they took? And what I realized is that the steps that most backable people take are actually remarkably similar. And there are a set of things that anyone can do to make themselves backable. Backable, this mysterious quality, this mysterious superpower, as it turns out, can be learned.
Well, that's the thing I've gotten to know so much about hanging out with you. And it's so encouraging, really, because when we think of someone being backable, you use the word superpower. And if we can't fly or we don't have x-ray vision, we think, gosh, maybe that doesn't apply to me. But what you've shown is that everybody can become backable. Everybody can learn the skills and develop the secrets. Those superpowers are not exclusively to a certain group. They're for us all. And you talked about making adjustments. Could you share maybe an example of what's an adjustment that one could make to become more backable?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll give you an easy one. I mean, one of the mistakes that we make is when we try to hide the weaknesses of our idea. And look, every new idea is going to have blind spots. It's going to have weaknesses. Because if it didn't, it wouldn't be a new idea. The mistake that we can make is when we try to hide those weaknesses. Reid Hoffman, who is the founder of LinkedIn, talked to me a lot about this when I was writing the book. And what he says is one of the most important techniques he has used in his career is what he calls steering into objections. And Reid Hoffman is the founder of LinkedIn. LinkedIn sold to Microsoft. And he calls this technique steering into objections. But he learned that actually early on in his career when he was at Apple. And when he was working at Apple, he was working in a division that was outside of product development, but he really wanted to work inside product development. The trick of it was that a lot of people at Apple wanted to work inside product development because Apple was a product company. That's where a lot of the exciting things happen. So a lot of people tried to make that shift and had no luck. So Reid decided to take a different approach. He went to the head of the division and he said, "Look, let's just get this out of the way. I know I don't have any product management experience. You don't even have to look at my resume. I'll just state that right away. But what I would love to do is pull together a document for you outlining all of my ideas. And if I did that, would you be willing to give that a look?" That was the deal that he made with the head of product development, and he did, and that launched his career. And that simple tool, this idea of steering into your objections, actually making that part of your pitch, not only does it gain credibility from the people that you're trying to pitch, but it actually then gets their attention for the stronger parts of your pitch. You won't always have a perfect answer to it, but what you want to do is make sure that you're calling out and showing people proactively that you understand what's on their mind.
So interesting. And, you and I both share a love of innovation, obviously. And I've always been perplexed because sometimes great ideas get rejected and terrible ideas get funded and backed and supported. And it's not so much only the merits of an idea that make the difference. And so you've talked quite a bit about this hidden step of innovation. Could you explore with us a little bit more about what is that hidden step?
Yeah, we have been told that innovation is a two-step formula. You get a great idea and great execution. But as it turns out, there is a hidden step in between. And this is where we bring people along with our ideas. This is where we do what I call flipping outsiders to insiders, so that when we show up to the execution stage, we're showing up at that stage together. Let's go back to the 1940s for a moment. Way back. Instant cake mix is revealed, is launched. And marketers and brands are so excited to launch instant cake mix because they think this thing is going to sell just like hotcakes. You literally pour water into this mix, put it in the oven, and there you go, right? So all these guys are completely surprised when they find out that the sales are abysmal. No one is buying these instant cake mixes, and they can't for the life of them figure out why. So they hire this psychologist named Ernest Deichter to go into the field, start interviewing people, and understand what is really going on here. And what Deichter came back with is, look, you guys have made the act of making a cake too easy. You've completely removed the customer from the creative process. So his ultimate recommendation was remove one ingredient from the cake mix, one thing that the customer themselves can add to the mix. So what they did was they removed the egg. So now as a customer, you actually had to crack your own egg, add it to the mix, stir it in, and then put the mix into the oven. And sales took off. Instant cake mixes were a total hit. Right? Researchers have since unpacked this, and they now call it the IKEA effect. Right? We place 5 times the amount of value on something that we actually helped build ourselves than something we just bought pre-made at the store. And so this hidden step is really about handing everybody an egg. Handing everybody an egg so that they can crack their own egg into the mix. And that way, when you show up to execution stage, we're showing up together, and everybody wants it to win.
It's fascinating. I've made cookies with my twins over the weekend, and we cracked the egg, so I can relate to that. Hey, we're here to talk a lot about the future of work. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, you've had extensive experience working in remote teams. You were, I know, a product leader at Mozilla Firefox, and you had a lot of experience in energizing and accomplishing a lot, despite the fact that they were remote. Obviously, in the pandemic that we're in, and we don't know exactly when we're going to be able to come together physically in the same way we were in the past, what tips or advice or insights do you have in terms of the future of work as it relates to engaging remote teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID, or even before COVID, Josh, one of the things that I think we all have to watch out for is what I call idea inequality. Idea inequality. And what I mean by that is when two different people that, maybe look different, talk different, can share the same idea and get a drastically different result. That's idea inequality. And idea inequality is a culture killer. It's an innovation killer. When that happens, creativity dissipates, teams disintegrate, people leave. And this is where I actually think remote can be a benefit, a surprising benefit. Because when we're in person and we're brainstorming an idea, brainstorming can quickly turn into shout storming. The loudest voices in the room tend to prevail. They tend to drown everybody else out. But when I was at Mozilla, we were spread out all around the world. A lot of people were working remotely, and instead of brainstorming, we would use what we called brain writing, where we would actually write out ideas and we would submit them to a central repository. And that way, all the ideas came in anonymously. So we could vote and comment on ideas, we could look at ideas and evaluate them, but we had no idea where they were coming from. And as a result of that, a lot of the best ideas that ended up bubbling up to the top were coming from the quietest people who were in the room, people who may not otherwise even raise those ideas. And so I think practices like this are now sort of, a necessity during shelter in place, but they've always kind of been around. And I think that if we embrace them, we may look back on this time and realize that we actually sped up instead of slowed down.
Yeah, it's such a good insight. And I love the idea of more democratizing where ideas come from and points around leadership. It shouldn't only be with the person with the loudest voice or the most forceful presentation or the most seniority. It should be the best ideas win. And I love the technique there that you've described.
Absolutely.
One last quick question. So Daniel Pink, who we both know, he's written multiple bestsellers, and he's had really very high praise for Backable. I know he's blurbed many books, but he's really very behind your mission here, saying that most exceptional people aren't just brilliant, but they're backable. And so why is he so excited about it, do you think? And why is it mission critical for leaders, especially in the new world of work, to make sure that being backable is a skill that they really harness and develop?
Yeah. Well, Daniel, I don't know, this. Daniel has converted his garage into this just really brilliant creative workspace. He calls it Pink Headquarters. And every time I'm at Pink Headquarters, I love sharing ideas with Daniel. And one of the things that we always talk about is this idea of money versus meaning. Because if you've been following Daniel's research and really the science-based arguments he's been making is that, as a workforce, as a culture, general culture, we've been shifting, especially amongst young employees. The thing that tends to matter most to us now has shifted from money to meaning. And, we derive meaning largely from our ideas. And that's not just a business concept, it's a human concept. I mean, ultimately, the thing that separates us as human beings from machines is our imagination, right? But if that imagination doesn't have impact, then it's easy to feel like a machine. So as leaders, our job isn't just to make ourselves backable, it's to make the people around us feel backable. There's just one story I'd love to share. It's one of my favorites. It's about a woman named Damayanti Hingorani, who's also a speaker with WWSG, and she was Ford Motor Company's first female engineer. And what's remarkable about her, other than the fact that she was the first engineer at a massive global manufacturer, is that she grew up as a refugee on the border of Pakistan and India. No running water, no electricity, but she taught herself how to read. And the first book that she read from cover to cover was the biography of Henry Ford. And she loved the book so much that she decided that one day she wanted to be an engineer with Ford Motor Company. And her parents got behind the vision. They saved every penny they had. They got her to the United States. They got her an education. But there was only one problem. This was the 1960s. And while Ford Motor Company had thousands of engineers working at the company, thousands, not a single one of them was a woman. And so when she finally got herself in front of a hiring manager, he looked at her resume and he said, look, I'm sorry, we don't have any female engineers working here. So she's deflated. She picks up her purse, she picks up her resume, and she begins to walk out the door. And then all of a sudden she turns around and she looks this hiring manager in the eyes and she tells her story about the struggle, every step that she had taken to get to this country, to get to this office, to be in this moment applying for this job. And this hiring manager was so moved by her story that he decided to back her. He decided to advocate for her, to fight for her. And that's how she became Ford Motor Company's first female engineer. And it was this backable moment that changed everything. It changed things for immigrants, it changed things for women in the workforce, and it changed things for me. Because Damayanti Hingorani is my mom. And my story and Sanjay's story, none of that would have been possible if a hiring manager from suburban Michigan hadn't decided to take a chance on a refugee from the other side of the world. And so, as leaders, let's not dismiss people just because of the way they look or talk. Instead, let's become backable change agents. Let's find really good people who want to do good in the world, and let's help them become backable. Because if we do that, then we can turn good people into heroes, we can bring bold ideas into the world, and I think the future of business looks very bright.
Oh, that's amazing, Suneel. I have chills down my spine thinking about that moment, and what a joyful story. And you mentioned meaning too. It's funny, when people chase meaning, then I actually think the money comes as a byproduct. Whereas when you only chase money, you end up with no meaning and probably no money either. So it's really funny, when you chase a more noble intent, the rewards tend to come as a byproduct. Well, thank you for those wonderful remarks about being backable. I appreciate your insights, and I hope that you'll help me continue to be backable as I go forward as a leader and a dad and a husband and such. So thank you very much, Suneel.
Josh, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Well, Josh, I mean, look, this is a total privilege. WWSG, thank you for pulling this all together. It's a privilege to interview somebody who has started and exited multiple tech companies. You've written multiple best-selling books, and to boot, you're a professional jazz musician. So when we think about the future of business, somebody who's constantly thinking about improvisation and how we adapt to change. I mean, you are the perfect person to really talk about this. So, let's begin here. With AI, machine learning, remote work, all these forces at play, how does human creativity fit into the puzzle?
Yeah, it's a really thoughtful question, and it's increasing is the quick answer. The hard skills of the past have largely become automated or commoditized. And then you say, well, what's left? What really separates the highest levels of output and service to the world? And that gets back to human creativity, which is this incredible gift that each of us naturally has. The research, by the way, is crystal clear that every one of us has enormous reservoirs of creative capacity. Now, unfortunately, many of us have been socialized out of it. In other words, we've grown out of those skills rather than into them. But the good news, I think, for us is that if we can reconnect to those talents, to unlock the creativity that may be dormant or even hibernating, that really becomes the competitive advantage that we seek in the world of business as leaders, as individual contributors, and even in our communities. I think it becomes the number one skill. And in fact, when you look at some of the data in terms of the number one skills that CEOs are looking for, the number one skills that organizations feel that they're lacking, it all gets back to creativity said differently, whether it's inventive thinking or creative problem solving or imagination or innovation as a whole.
Yeah, and that really kind of transitions to your book, because I think your book is very much about this. Big Little Breakthroughs is the name of the book. And inside the book, which I've had a chance, thank you again for giving me an advance sort of look at it. It's just fascinating stuff. You talk about MIT Innovation Premium. What is that? And how should leaders think about that as they chart their future?
Yeah, it's fascinating, interesting research. So many of us think of creativity as soft, like an afterthought, like, oh, if I have time, that's kind of a nice thing. But we say, hey, we're hardline business leaders, and especially in the future of work with pandemics and increasing competition and speed, we say, well, does it really matter, or can I deprioritize our creative efforts? MIT connected up with Forbes, and they did a fascinating piece of research. They took a look at publicly traded organizations and looked at what they should be valued at based on all kinds of objective measures. Discounted cash flow, asset-based customers, efficiencies, workforce, blah, blah, blah. And then they adjusted for other things, domestic and international currency fluctuations. You name it, these pencil-pushing wizards figured it out. And then they said, well, what's left is how the stock market values that organization, not for the hard evidence, but for how they are perceived as it relates to innovation. So what they learned is that the companies that are perceived to be more innovative have an innovation premium. In other words, part of their market value isn't just the core assets, it's the perception of their ability to be innovative. And on the other side, companies that are not perceived to be innovative essentially pay an innovation tax. So if you look at Tesla, which I don't even know today's stock price, I can't keep up with it, rocketing forward, breakthrough stock prices, and it really shouldn't be on any objective measure. So what's happening with Tesla is they are enjoying a massive innovation premium to the tunes of hundreds of billions of dollars of market value because the world perceives them to be innovative. Compare that to Ford Motor Company, your mom's previous employer, who's getting essentially an innovation tax. They should be considered at a higher value, but they're not because the world doesn't perceive them to be innovative. The thing I would suggest to those listening today is this applies not only to publicly traded organizations, it applies to small businesses and even us as individuals. If we want to get ahead, we want to produce more, we want to win more clients, we want to get a promotion, the more we are perceived to be that source of innovation, the more results we will enjoy.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And maybe that gets to, another point that I think you constantly make, and it's a brilliant point, which is, the difference between playing offense with innovation versus playing defense with innovation. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, as someone who's now spent 40 years playing jazz guitar and 30 years researching human creativity, I'm so passionate about this. And it's such a misunderstood topic. Very often people think of innovation in the classic sense, which is a product breakthrough or maybe a marketing campaign. But in that sense, it's only for people wearing lab coats or hoodies. It doesn't apply to most of us mere mortals. But I like the note, and so when you think about classic innovation, it's generally offense driven. In other words, you're trying to drive growth, you're trying to drive volume, you're trying to drive forward progress, put points on the board, so to speak. But when we only look at it that way, we're missing an opportunity. And that opportunity, I call it playing defense innovation, which is applying the principles, the mindsets, the tactics of innovation for other types of activities. Maybe it's to reduce costs. Maybe it's to increase efficiency. Maybe it's to decrease safety incidents on a factory floor. Maybe it's to fight back a competitive threat or enter a new market in a less expensive manner. And so we can use creativity certainly to put points on the board, but we can also use creativity to defend turf, to drive efficiency, and ultimately to grow our businesses. So I think we can look at creativity in a much broader lens than is often perceived.
Yeah. So, you talk about this lens, the broader lens. There's also sort of the lens of just a big little breakthrough, and that's the lens you're offering a reader. How is that different from the classical view of innovation?
Yeah, so back to perceptions. We often think innovation only counts if it's $1 billion idea. So We were talking about Ford, when Henry Ford invented the movable assembly line, innovation. The light bulb is often cited as the symbol of innovation. And to be clear, those are innovative things. But you know what else is innovative? Rephrasing the wording on an outbound sales email so you get a 2% increase in performance. Now, that doesn't make the cover of a magazine, but it still is innovative. In the same way that an earthquake is measured in magnitude, and a magnitude 9.0, horrible destruction, magnitude 2.4 is barely noticeable, but there's still seismic events nonetheless. And so I think innovation sort of comes in different flavors. So there's one level of innovation. Think about it all caps. All caps is the big stuff. In penicillin, hopefully we get a vaccine and some better therapeutics for COVID. Those are innovation in all caps. Those might be once a decade things that win awards and Nobel Prizes. One double click down, though, is innovation just with a capital I. And these might be the 2 or 3 things that we discover as an organization once a year. Perhaps they have a meaningful impact. We come up with a new approach to business and we increase our win rate in the market by 34%. That's a big deal. And those are much more accessible than the once a decade type all caps innovations. One level deep, think about innovation all lowercase. And these are the ones that I just love, Suneel. These are the big little breakthroughs that are accessible to us all. I think of big little breakthroughs as high velocity, high frequency, daily creativity. I feel like I'm just on this crazy quest. I'm very passionate about helping everyday people become everyday innovators. And that doesn't mean everybody needs to play jazz guitar or do spoken word poetry or paint on canvas. If you're a customer service rep, you can be innovative in the context of that role. If you're a quality assurance specialist, you can be innovative in that role. So to me, big little breakthroughs is such an empowering thing because it's innovation for all of us. It makes it an inclusive activity, one that is accessible to every person in an organization. And if an organization, let's say there's 10,000 people, they have 5 innovators, that's a problem. I want them to have 10,000 innovators. If they have an army of everyday innovators, they become unstoppable.
Yeah. I mean, I know this is something you've been passionate about. I mean, ever since we first met, I mean, these are the conversations we've been having. And I mean, that's why you've written a few best-selling books on the topic. How is this one, just creatively, just personally, how has this one been different for you?
Well, thank you for asking. So, again, for those listening, my new book, Big Little Breakthroughs, comes out in April. And I treated this totally different. I've written 3 books and I've had some wonderful success with them, but I tried to say, how can I reimagine? How can I take this book to the next level? So first of all, I probably spent 10x the amount of research and writing time in making this hopefully something that's really special. I tried to have a lot more rich storytelling. I tried to have a lot more humor in it. And also, it's sort of deeply researched. I try to reveal a lot of surprising truths. There's a lot of twists and turns to it. It's funny, Suneel, one of my my benchmarks was my wife, whom my wife Tia, who's like, my hero. I just love her to death. But she, in my previous book, she reads it because she has to. And I said, all right, I'm going to try to write a book that Tia wants to read, not reads it because she has to. And so thankfully it's passed the test. She completed the manuscript and we're still polishing it up. But I really was passionate about it, Suneel. And my goal was to make it a book that isn't just for only leaders, which it certainly applies to business leaders, but it applies to every one of us personally and professionally. And I hope that it makes a difference. I mean, the real calling for me was to make a difference in people's lives. I just feel so frustrated sometimes that all of us have this dormant capacity that can move society forward, that can cure disease, that can put our kids through better schools. I mean, we look at all the challenges and all the opportunities in front of us, and I see all these people that have the skills inside, but for whatever reason, it's locked under key. And so if I can help open it up, even in a small way, to me, that's a real privilege, and I'm just so passionate and excited to share the book with the world.
And that's what makes, I think, a book like this special, which is like, it's not just written for the big guys. I mean, one thing you always talk about is that you really love stories of underdogs. Like, that's really, really important to you. People who use creativity to unlock massive results. Like, I mean, I know for the book, you covered a lot of these stories. You really, really uncovered every rock, looked at every nook and cranny. Like, can you share one of your favorite stories?
Yeah, one that's really cool. So I got this bright yellow postcard, handwritten, and says, hey, Josh, I read your material and it's like inspired me and it's changed my life. And I don't get those that often, to be clear. I'm not boasting. I mean, it was a really special note. So I called the guy up and it turns out this is a guy named Jesse Cole. So Jesse had this dream. He wanted to run a baseball team, but he was 23 years old and didn't know what he was doing. And so he said he started studying P.T. Barnum. And not, people think of Barnum was a shyster, but he really wasn't. He just loved entertaining people. A lot of the negative things attributed to Barnum were actually untrue. So anyway, he said, I'm going to create entertainment. He goes, I know I can't be the best baseball leader, but I can be the best entertainer. So long story short, he takes over the minor league team in Savannah, Georgia. They had this beautiful stadium and like 200 people would show up every night. So he completely changed everything. First of all, he renamed the team the Savannah Bananas, which is very clever and catchy. People wanted to run him out of town, by the way. And he basically says it's a circus and every night a baseball game breaks out. And so they just push the creative boundaries in all these big little breakthrough ways. Instead of having beautiful young women as cheerleaders, they have senior citizens, the Banana Nanas. These old women come out and dance and shake to the crowd's amusement. They also have, by the way, a male cheerleading squad called the Dad Bod Cheerleading Squad, which is just a treat. In between the innings, they do choreographed dances. At the ninth inning, they take off their shirts and they run around with round cards like the boxing people do. They basically make everything different. Another example, it's one price includes your parking and your food and all the hot dogs and Coke you can drink, and everything is different about it. So he takes over this dusty team, had almost no money. In fact, Jesse was sleeping on an air mattress in the stadium with his wife. But he started to innovate one big little breakthrough at a time. He didn't have massive capital. He didn't have massive resources. He just had this big heart and determination and a whole lot of creativity. So fast forward to today. They have sold out over 100 games in a row, 4,000 seats. There's a 10,000 person waiting list to get tickets. They keep doing crazy things. In fact, they just recently banned all advertising in the stadium. So they said, we fans first, they don't want to see ads. So they took all the ads out, giving away hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue because they wanted to delight their fans. They keep pushing the creative boundaries. And here's the best part. The team started winning. The team all of a sudden started playing better baseball, and they actually won the division championship. So they had this business school professor study, why did they win? And it turns out these same players who came in had an improved record, and they barely focused on the baseball. But when they were having fun, when they were getting creative, their performance increased as a byproduct. So again, to me, this is the story that we can all relate to. Many of us don't have billion-dollar budgets. We don't have massive tech farms. We don't have super genius IQs. But like Jesse Cole, we can apply one little act of creativity in front of the other, and amazing things can occur.
And I'm guessing as a result of all this, Josh, he asked you obviously to join the Dad Bod cheerleading squad.
I'm working on it, man. I got a little COVID-5 going. I hope it's not a COVID-10 before long, but
right.
I really admire him. And I just really, you know what, Suneel, kidding aside, I just admire all the underdogs, all the people who again, maybe weren't born to the right family, went to the right school, certain height, weight, gender, age, but they put their creativity first. And that truly not only becomes the great equalizer, that becomes the great edge, and it's within the grasp of every one of us.
Yeah, I mean, Josh, one last question, because I think we can all use it. You've kind of been at the epicenter of ideas and idea creation. What's one simple technique, one simple thing that we can do to help generate better ideas?
Yeah, I actually really passionate about techniques. I kind of have this whole toolkit that I've developed over the years. But one of my favorites and the easiest way to do it is something I call the judo flip. The judo flip is basically taking traditional wisdom and flipping it upside down. So the technique is pretty simple. Let's say you're trying to solve a problem or seize an opportunity. First, you make a list. What are all the ways that you've attempted this before? What are the common ways that are typical, prevailing wisdom in your industry? And then down the page, you draw a line. And next to each item that you wrote, you ask yourself, what's the polar opposite? What would it look like if I judo flipped it? If most teams doing baseball charge a bunch of money for parking and hot dogs and beer, a judo flip would be give everybody free all of those things. So the judo flip approach is, again, examining the traditional mechanisms, the prevailing wisdom, and sort of sticking your finger in the eye and saying, all right, let's do the exact opposite. Let's judo flip an opportunity. Let's judo flip a problem. And when we take that oppositional approach, instead of following the herd, we break free and break away. And that to me is so exciting. I've seen people do this in such dramatic ways, from the arts to business to sports and everywhere in between. And I really think all of us can find a little judo flip to grab onto and take our businesses and even our personal lives to the next level.
All right. Well, Josh, thank you so much. I mean, you've judo flipped a lot of things. I've seen it in action. It's been amazing to watch you root for the underdog, and thanks for sharing all of this with us. We can't wait for the book to come out in April.